Uh, Thanks, Professor Christopher, the principal of the college. Thanks, Dr. Jabraj. Thanks, my dear friend, Professor Dr. Mutturaj, for inviting Dr. Rahul Sapkal and me for this webinar, COVID and labor issues associated with that. I'm quite impressed by the history of the American college situated in Madurai. Since I hail from Tamil Nadu, I'm able to appreciate the fact that Madurai has been a seat of intellectual Tamil capital and also academic capital, as I see now. And the buildings are quite awe-inspiring. So having said this, and I also must make a personal mention of the fact that having been permanently associated, long-term associated with the Indian Society of Labor Economics, and uniquely positioned national academic body on labor studies founded by late President Dr. B.V. Giri. I've been associated with Dr. Mutturaj for a number of years, more than a couple of decades, as he says. So I'm privileged to be here to be talking alongside my colleague and co-author, academic colleague and co-author, Dr. Rahul Sapkal. Now let me start this technical presentation. Now we need to have a kind of a perspective, a paradigm to find out where exactly are we in terms of our regulation of the labor market and industrial relations system, and where are we going. So we need to have some kind of a theoretical construct to be able to understand and appreciate what has been done during COVID and what will follow later. Stylizing broadly, we have two types of labor market governance. One is the classic institutional model, which in 1944 was called as the human rights model, or the ILO model. The Philadelphia Declaration 1994, very famously gave a very unique declaration saying that labor is not a commodity. I must mention here that this very apparently simple declaration that labor is not a commodity has been a very revolutionary declaration, thereby decommodifying labor and also to de-link labor as a factor of production, which is being taught according to the neoclassical theory, and to say that labor is not just a factor of production, but labor embodies what Dr. Ruskin and Mahatma Gandhi said, embodies human dignity. It's more than selling labor services in the labor market. They are not market agents. And this is the fundamental premise on which the entire edifice of ILO principles, labor standards framework, and their paradigms, recent paradigms of decent work, formalizing informality, fair globalization, and all those other declarations of its parent body, the United Nations, namely the Human Rights Declaration, Declaration of Human Rights in 1945. All these are constructed on the simple premise, but very powerful premise indeed. What does this model say? This model says that the decent work model simply says that while economic growth is important, delinking labor welfare from economic growth could be disastrous, could prove to be could prove to be resulting in deceleration or weakening of labor welfare and dilution of labor rights. And economic growth and labor rights can go hand in hand. It is perfectly possible. So this is the institutional perspective. And ILO during COVID has released a document of tackling COVID, and it is based on 4 pillars. And one of the pillars is that representatives of workers, that is the trade unions, must be consulted through social dialogue forums. They are legitimate social actors in the industrial relations system. So this decent work model calls for a golden balance between efficiency and equity. Diametrically opposed is a neoliberal argument which says that in the era of globalization, we need, countries and firms compete on low-cost model, and for that the employers require labor flexibility in order to achieve competitiveness. So it calls for labor flexibility, which leads to low labor standards, and labor becomes a dispensable one. And particularly we have seen the migrant workers, of whom I'll be talking a little later. They are seen as circulating and footloose ones, like as Professor Ian Brayman has called in his social anthropological works. And it also sees labor as a factor of production. Now, these are the 2 paradigms that are competing, and I will show you that the neoliberal model has been dominant in India, which has got dangerous consequences. And we go to the, let me now start looking at the labor market in India. Labor market in India is characterized by informality and rising unemployment. As we see, I'm just reporting the 2017-18 periodic labor welfare survey results. Of the total employment of 465.1 million, manufacturing accounts for only just about less than one-fifth of the total workers. It's the service sector which is second dominant, accounting for more than 1/3, and the agriculture sector around 42%. But on the right side, you have a table in which we see that of the total workers in manufacturing and non-manufacturing, which includes construction, mining, and utility services and service sector, the share of informal workers is very high. The share of informal workers ranges from 80 to 95%. So informality is the dominant feature of Indian labor market. And Dr. Rahul Sapkal and I have done written elsewhere that the workers in India, they not only are informal, they are precarious in nature. Their employment is precarious in nature also. The proportion of regular workers in 2017-18 and 18-19 who did not have a written job contract in the non-agriculture sector is a whopping 70%. In other words, 7 out of 10 workers in the non-agriculture sector did not or do not have a formal job contract. And more than half of them were not eligible for paid leave. And much more worryingly, around half of them they are not eligible for social security, like maternity benefits or accident compensation or provident funds or gratuity or any kind of medical insurance. So this is the nature of the nature of employment relationship in India. So to sum it up, the labor market in India is highly informal, and the employment relationships in India are highly precarious. Now, what has happened to, we know now labor market in India is predominantly informal and the employment relationships are highly precarious. And during COVID, what happened? We have to rely on the CMIE unemployment high frequency data. If we see on the left-hand side, unemployment rate from January 18 to May 20, January 2018 to May 20, has been on a slightly on an onward trajectory, but from April 2020, March to April and May 2020, it suddenly spikes. On an average, during April and May 2020, the economy has witnessed 23 to 24% of unemployment. In other words, 1/4 of our labor force is unemployed. It is anywhere between 100 to 120 million. But as a national lockdown has been gradually liberalized, on the right hand side we have a figure in which shows that unemployment rate has been declining in India from 24%, nearly around 23% on 1st of June to about 19% today's what, 15th, on 14th of June. So in urban areas and rural areas, it has been around 1/5, that is 20% or 18 to 20%. So as national lockdown will be liberalized, unemployment rates will come down. But today, a couple of news reports have carried that, and particularly some news reports in the United States have carried that labor market will suffer from reallocation shock, which means that at least 1/3 of the unemployed will continue to remain to be unemployed because of the reallocation shock. The reallocation shock simply means that because of the COVID, workers are unemployed. Many of them may come back to employment status, but several of them will not be able to come back to the labor market because the work will be reallocated, production processes will be restructured or relocated, and also firms might close down because of weakening of working capital issues. So there will be a reallocation, and as a result, at least 1/3, they have estimated that between 33 to 50% of the workers will continue to remain unemployed in the medium term, which has got a very undesirable implications for the workers. And then let us come to what kind of a labor regulation framework that India has. Sorry. India, around independence time, post-independence, immediately after independence, because of the planned economic development model that we had, the policy makers designed and developed an elaborate institutional legal framework. I mean, we always come across in the newspapers that we have around 44 central labor laws and hundreds of state labor laws. This is because of the fact that labor is on the concurrent list, so that the central government and the state governments are competent to enact labor laws. I mean, I'm not going to get into the debate whether labor laws are numerous and other aspects. Suffice to say that we have central labor laws and state labor laws. And I have mentioned here only those labor laws which are relevant for the informal workers and the unorganized workers, because I'm going to concentrate more on this, less privileged and informal and precarious workers. We have around 10 labor laws, and if one sees the years in which they have been enacted, most of the laws, Trade Unions Act, Minimum Wages Act, Interstate Migrant Workmen Act, Bonded Labor System Abolition Act, all of them have been enacted even prior to the 1980s. And of course, the Building and Other Construction Workers Act, or the MG Narega Act, and the Unorganized Workers Social Security Act, or the Street Vendors Act have been enacted post-liberalization. This also reflects, I have deliberately put this kind of two sets of labor laws. One set of labor laws were enacted during the planning economy period. Students of economy know that it is a command economy period. And the other set of labor laws which are directly connected with certain categories of unorganized workers, like building and construction workers, or unorganized workers in general, or street vendors in the post-liberalization period. This is because of the fact that over a period of time, the proportion of workers in the informal sector or the unorganized sector increased considerably, and as we entered the 1990s, from the mid 1990s onwards, we began, the policy makers began to see preponderant concentration of workers in the unorganized sector or informal sector. And then as per the ILO conversations in India, we moved away from the informal sector concept to informal economy concept. That is, informal workers, that is those who do not enjoy labor, employment security, income security, voice security, social security, multiple forms of labor market securities could exist not only in the unorganized sector, but also in the so-called organized sector. For example, to demonstrate the latter, in the organized sector, we have contract workers, we have casual workers, we have non-apprentice act trainees, and we have migrant workers. So that is why ILO and Indian labor statisticians coined the term informal economy, which is far more inclusive than the sectoral based informal sector approach. Now we have all these laws, but I'm going to talk about have all these laws been helpful to the informal workers, unorganized workers, migrant workers during the COVID time. That is what I'm going to talk about. Now, during the COVID time, we all know the national lockdown took place, and the national lockdown for nearly 45 days was absolute. In other words, movement of people was not allowed. And of course, we saw in Delhi and other places migrants rebelling against this national lockdown because they were deprived of shelter, they were deprived of food, they were deprived of food rations, they were deprived of jobs, etc. They became extremely insecure and they wanted to go back to their hometowns, that is the source states. Source states. And then the finance minister announced in 2 phases relief packages. I'm not going to talk about the relief packages concerning industry and other segments of the economy. I'm going to talk about the relief packages announced in relation to labor. And only one set of package was announced for the organized sector employees. That is, they allowed the organized sector employees to withdraw from their employees' provident fund a loan facility, that is non-refundable loan facility from their own contributions. On the other hand, the central government undertook to pay EPF contributions of 12 plus 12, 24% on labor and employer side for those employees who are earning less than 15,000 rupees per month, who are employed in establishments, EPF covered establishments employing less than 100. So the central government would pay instead of by the employer and the labor. To that extent, the labor cost of the employers would come down for these establishments, and the take-home pay of the workers will increase. Apart from that, there was no measure that was extended to the organized sector workers. Well, fine, that is fine. At the same time, the Ministry of Home Affairs on March 29 issued an order, not an advisory, that during the period of national lockdown, all employers, be they factories, factory employers or shops and establishment owners, they must pay full and prompt and timely wages to the workers, irrespective of the fact whether they are principal employers or contractors. So this was another relief measure that was provided by the Ministry of Home Affairs, which extended not only to the unorganized workers but also to the organized sector workers. But what about the unorganized sector workers? Unorganized sector workers, we see that the finance minister largely covered 2 sets of workers. One is a migrant worker and another one is the street vendors. For the migrant workers, of course, then the rural workers. under the MG Narega scheme, the finance minister did to take two measures, namely increase in the average wage, minimum wage under the MG Narega from 180 rupees to 202 rupees, and also increase the budgetary allocation to more than 1 lakh crores. For the migrant workers, food security, not only to the migrant workers, but all the workers, food security was given under PMJKY, 5 kilograms of rice and 5 kilograms of dal. And later, in the second tranche, she provided for 5 kilograms of grains and 1 kilograms of chana. And she allocated 3,109 crores for implementation, which if I calculate from the 21 lakh crores, it is just 0.15% of the total. Then of course there were some long-term measures like One Nation, One Ration Card, and also providing affordable rental housing for the migrant workers, and for the street vendors 10,000 rupees working capital loan would be given. Now if you see all these things, all these measures, there are three features that come. Number one, for the organized sector workers, accepting the assurance of wage payment, the relief is very narrow. For the unorganized sector workers, the finance minister increased the minimum wage, increased the wage of under the MG Narega to 202, whereas economists like John Race has pointed out that the actual wage was in many states was higher than, more than 250 rupees. Secondly, food security was provided to all the workers, that is laudable. But for the street vendors, she provided liquidity in terms of working capital and also long-term benefits of food security and some rental structures that may come in the medium to long term. So as a result, we see that there has not been a credible, something substantial has not been done. Now I shall make 2 points here. The employers bodies has challenged the Ministry of Home Affairs March 29th order of payment of wages to workers and employees during the lockdown, irrespective of whether they worked or not, in the Supreme Court. And just recently the Supreme Court issued an order saying that the employers who did not pay these wages, the state government or the central government cannot prosecute them. Secondly, it cannot be a forced order, and the Supreme Court ordered saying that the issue of wages should be taken up for conciliation or wage negotiations between trade unions and employers where trade unions exist, or by employees and workers, and the employers where trade unions do not exist. Of course, the State Labor Department will facilitate conciliation or direct negotiation. In other words, wage as a right during lockdown has been removed by the Supreme Court, and it has been left to direct negotiations. What are the implications? The implications are that it is not a right anymore, despite the fact that the Ministry of Home Affairs has issued an order invoking the National Disaster Management Control Act 2005. Secondly, organized sector workers, various surveys show that, and the migrant workers, informal workers, have not received wages during the period. Some received 50% wages, some did not receive, and many. Today, the migrant workers, the STAN report has come. It said that 90% of the migrant workers did not receive wages during the lockdown period. And even the teachers, I'm told, in Maharashtra, for 1 month they received only 50% of the salary. If educated and highly organized workers, they did not get their full wage payment or salary payment during the month of April and May. Forget March, because 24 days people have worked. For the month of March and April, the scenario is that there are many. There are those who work from home, they got their salary. Those who were lucky and institutions are benevolent, they got full pay. Otherwise, they got half pay for a month or 1 quarter, and millions of workers did not get their pay, and particularly for the migrant workers, the contractors or the principal employees did not make payment. On the other hand, the unorganized workers have been given a very meager assistance by the government. So we see that there is a public policy failure. Now the second aspect of it is that migrant workers, even though we had an Interstate Migrant Workmen Act enacted in 1979, under which the contractors were to register, and the migrant workers in the host states were to be provided equal pay for equal work, shelter, social security, and traveling allowance. All kinds of facilities had to be given to them, but this act was not at all implemented. And these migrant workers were treated as easy, disposable, footloose circulating workers, even by the government departments. Now, the biggest failure, as I see, is that the government of India during COVID time and the state governments found all of a sudden that they did not have any database, credible database on the migrant workers. Even though migrant workers were, and then the World Bank estimated it to be 40 million on April 22nd. And from the finance minister's speech, we see that she mentioned that 8 crore workers, that is 80 million migrant workers who are not covered under the National Food Security Act or state scheme of public distribution system. That means 80 million must be are those who are deprived of food security. That means there are those migrant workers who had food security. So they may be 40 million or 30 million, we do not know. So we get a figure, a figure that they must be around 120 million or 130 million migrant workers. This is the guesstimate. Now from the Shramik Trains data, I found out that the railways say that they transported 6 million migrant workers from May 1st to June 14th. But the Home Minister gave a statement that all the central government and all the state governments transported 1.25 crore migrants. That means, you see, it is more than double of what the railways say. Now we are all playing with data. We do not know what is the exact. So we have a data deficit. So migrant workers, they do not have a face. They do not even have a statistical count in the labor market. And what about the unorganized workers? We have an Unorganized Workers Social Security Act 2008, which was enacted as a result of the recommendations made by the National Commission for Enterprises in the Unorganized Sector. And this, in this US UWSS Act proved to be a disaster. Even then, it provided for some kind of a social security for, in terms of old age pension, in terms of accident compensation, in terms of medical insurance, but we do not have data. And this act provided for registration of unorganized workers under the Unorganized Workers Social Security Act. And according to the act, workers facilitation centers must be constituted at the local level, local panchayat level, in which the trade unions and the NGOs will play a role. But we find that worker facilitation centers were not constituted. The welfare boards have not been constituted, and we do not have any statistical data concerning these workers at all. So we find that informal workers are absolutely even faceless. They do not enter into the statistical system. But then on the other hand, some state governments have made certain disruptive labor law changes. 12 state governments extended the maximum hours of work from 8 to 12 in a day and 48 to 72 in a week. 4 state governments have withdrawn. It is 2 by litigation. That's why I mentioned 2. And on the other hand, employers have been trying a labor shortage. We find that now at least 8 state governments require the workers to work more than 8 hours. That means workers will have to work 11 to 12 hours, and along with that, the travel time of 2 hours. So a worker will typically be outside the home for 13 to 14 hours in a day. And women workers, imagine them, which women worker would like to be away from home for the more than 10 to 12 hours? So it is a gender penalty in the sense that women will not, come forward to work in the factories, and employers also would not require them because they have to provide security. So there is a gender penalty, and it will have implications on already low levels of female labor force participation rate, which has gone down to 20%, and according to the ILO data, it is 18 to 19%. And on the other hand, Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh, particularly Uttar Pradesh, has issued an ordinance by which it has completely suspended the operation of 34 labor laws in Uttar Pradesh, and narrowed down the operation of Factories Act and Building and Other Construction Workers Act, which means workers in Uttar Pradesh cannot form trade unions, cannot register them, they will not have the right to collective bargaining, they cannot raise industrial disputes, they cannot have access to conciliation machinery to resolve their industrial disputes, they cannot take up their industrial disputes to the labor courts and industrial tribunals. Whole lot of labor rights have been taken away. They cannot demand as a matter of right good conditions of work. And now this UP ordinance is pending President's approval. In the meanwhile, the employers associations like CII and others have approached the labor minister and the prime minister to say that COVID is a very critical time. This is the right time to introduce labor flexibility. I talked about the neoliberal model, labor flexibility. We want the kind of UP model to be, to be invoked at the national level. What does it mean? UP and other model: increased hours of work, suspension of labor rights, high labor flexibility, and employers will have unilateral determination of terms and conditions of work. This violates not only our constitution, but also the international labor treaties to which we are signatory. So we are moved far away from the institutional model to the neoliberal model. In the neoliberal model, labor is a factor of production. Those who are in the audience who have studied economics, microeconomics would know that labor is a factor of production, which means it is dispensable. On the other hand, the labor rights, it has been historically constructed. The first labor law dates back to 1881, which regulated the hours of work. Now we are going back to the 19th century. So in other words, we are failing in terms of existing laws. There is an executive failure, labor administrative failure, and the fiscal policies are inadequate, and the labor law changes are anti-workers, that is anti-labor welfare workers. Now what do I suggest? This is my final slide. I suggest insert what the government could have done. Economists across the spectrum, whether they belong to the neoclassical school or institutional school, they all called for direct benefit transfer of minimum wages or poverty level wages into the accounts of the people. That is a kind of a universal income transfer. But the government did not do, as we saw the fiscal relief provided by the finance minister. And registrations, now the state governments are woken up and they are registering migrant workers. But today Economic Times has carried a report that the skill mapping of the migrant workers have been done in a shoddy manner. That is, a worker has been registered, worker skill has been registered as let us say a carpenter or a cutter or a welder, but in fact that worker did not possess a skill. That is, in other words, mismapping has been done. And a wage code has been passed, but it has not been notified. In other words, we do not have a statutory national floor level minimum wage. And MG Narega, even now it has not been, though MG Narega has made some progress, it has the progress report from various states show that we have made only slow progress. In the medium term, like we have rural unemployment, the government should consider urban unemployment as a matter of right. So urban unemployment guarantee scheme will have to be developed. Then we need universal unemployment allowance scheme. So Second National Commission on Labor recommended it in 2002. If we had a universal unemployment allowance scheme, this Ministry of Home Affairs order would asking the employers to compulsorily pay the wages irrespective of one worked or not need not have been necessary at all. remove all the bad labor laws. And in all these things, please understand, trade unions were not consulted. Trade unions are legitimate bodies of workers. The labor minister held only 2 consultations, that too in the month of May. The finance minister, the prime minister did not consult trade unions, though we are personally aware that the central trade unions had written a number of representations. And ILO has driven home the point. ILO has said that 400 million workers are likely to enter into the web of poverty. And today, yesterday, the United Nations has said that millions of workers will be pushed to poverty level. And I already spoke of reallocation shock in the labor market. So even if national lockdown, and today ICMR has issued a report saying that Corona may see a peaking in the month of November, December. So Corona is not going to leave us. Lockdown may prevail in one way or the other. So we are having what is not even constitutionally envisaged, a very unusual trade-off between livelihood and lives. Livelihood means ability to earn income. Lives means existential threat. But Constitution has seen lives and livelihood as complementary. But COVID has kind of posed it as a kind of a trade-off. Now, this is a serious stage in which we are. And Dr. Pranab Sen has said that then the economy, as there must be many economic students, last 2-3 sentences, the economic growth will go for a shock of more than 12% drop, and about 40 to 50 million will remain unemployed. These are really, really extremely worrisome statistics that are coming, and we know that yesterday, a few days ago, we know that index of industrial production has considerably dipped. And today we read in the Economic Times that the data regarding index of industrial production will not be collected and the employees will not be penalized. So we are going to suffer from data deficit. We are suffering from public policy deficit. We are suffering from wrong labor law changes. And we are suffering from absence of social security benefit, social protection floor, which ILO talked about in terms of unemployment allowance, in terms of our universal basic income, in terms of social security, and the labor laws which concern unorganized workers like construction workers, migrant workers, or the street vendors are not being implemented. Traders have, even the micro, medium, small enterprises have suffered tremendously. What the finance minister has done in the name of self-reliant India, provided liquidity, but not subsidies. So it is time that the government of India wakes up and provide direct benefit transfer to workers for the next 3 to 4 months, and universalize PDS, public distribution system, and provide extended food security, and introduce unemployment, urban and rural and unemployment. Implement rural national rural employment guarantee scheme much more vigorously, 100 days, 150 days, and introduce urban unemployment guarantee scheme, so that labor who has been pushed to the depths of poverty and suffering is able to come up a little bit and feel secure. And if the COVID times are going to be going to last longer than what has been envisaged, I think we should do this. With these, I end. Thank you very much.
So thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Shyam. Really, we are able to enjoy a global lecture from a local area. I must thank on behalf of American College. You are doing wonderful services to the new generations who are following this webinar. And you really touched all the points, which are, I think, I know maybe after a month's time, it will become a quality article appeared in the international journal or an edited book. I must thank and congratulate for your support. Without taking much time, next I request Dr. Rahul, please take another 30 to 40 minutes to share your PPT. the end of the session, we'll have a interaction. I think a more interaction must be there because you brought many issues to be discussed by the participants.